They didn't forget me, they deleted me. 10 family reunions, and not once did my name appear. No seat, no plate, not even a typo. So when I saw the beach house listed for sale under a fake LLC, I didn't panic. I signed the deed. Quietly, legally. And when my family arrived like they always did, smiling, sun hat ready, full of themselves, they were met with a clerk saying, "Sorry, this property now belongs to Miss Evelyn Hart." That's me, the daughter they erased, the sister they outgrew. But I never left. I just learned how to come back differently. With the keys, I didn't expect to be on the list. Not anymore. Not after 10 years of being cropped out, skipped over and smiled past. Still, when I saw the subject line, Hart Family Retreat 2025, RSVP by Friday, something inside me twitched. Reflex maybe. I clicked anyway. I scrolled through the guest names with clinical detachment. Lana, of course, and her picture-perfect husband, their twin boys with beachy curls and identical dimples. Aunt Jo and her new girlfriend. Cousin Jeremy, who once stole my college tuition check and said it was a mix-up. Even great-aunt Vera, who's 94 and insists on wearing heels on the sand. But no Evelyn. Not even a maybe tag next to my name. No typo, no oversight, just vacancy. A vacancy shaped like me. I sat alone in my corner office in Santa Monica. Glass walls, sleek furniture, a framed MBA from Yale I earned while working 2 jobs and swallowing 1,000 humiliations. I had everything my family said they wanted from a daughter, except charm, apparently, except loud laughter and group text energy, except fitting in. I stared at the email again, my fingers curled slightly over the trackpad. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched the name of the beach house, the Hart House. St. Simon's Island. White shutters, wraparound porch, swing that groaned like an old man in wind. The last place my father ever laughed freely before the stroke blurred his words. My breath caught. It wasn't listed as a vacation rental anymore. It was for sale. My heartbeat faltered. For sale. No one told me. Not even a just so you know. And the kicker? It wasn't under the Hart family name anymore. It was owned by something called Shoreline Synergy LLC. I wasn't born yesterday. I knew what that meant. Lana. Always managing things, keeping it clean. I closed the laptop gently, not slammed, not thrown. I'd learnt long ago how to be composed under betrayal. Behind me sat a single relic of childhood, a seashell painted turquoise and flecked with glitter. I was 9 when my dad gave it to me. "You think in tides, Evie," he said, his voice soft, steady. "Not waves, tides return, waves crash." The metaphor had felt important at the time. Now it returned like a whispered prophecy. I turned back to the screen, reopened the browser, and clicked Contact Agent. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to know, is that while they were planning themed t-shirts and coordinating shrimp boils, I was learning how to read trusts. I had buried myself in estate law, corporate veils, fallback clauses. I had quietly, methodically become the kind of woman who doesn't argue when erased. She just signs where it counts. I printed everything. I made 2 calls, one to Savannah, my college roommate turned property attorney, and one to myself, a whisper of a promise that I wouldn't flinch this time. Savannah's search took less than 20 minutes. "You're not just mentioned in the trust," she said. "There's a clause tied to you directly. If taxes or insurance lapse, the fallback beneficiary takes ownership." My heart beat so loud I could hear it over the line. "And guess what?" she added. "They lapsed. 2 quarters in a row." My voice cracked. "You're sure?" Her tone didn't shift. "I triple-checked. Evelyn, if you want it, the house is legally yours. No battle, no fight. Just yours." I didn't answer. I looked at the turquoise shell again, the glitter now chipped, but still shimmering under the California sun. They didn't forget me. They deleted me. But I remembered everything. I didn't move for a long time after that call. The quiet in my apartment felt dense, like fog that knew it wasn't welcome but stayed anyway. Outside, the Santa Monica sun was doing its usual golden performance across the balcony, but it didn't warm me. They were selling the house. Our house. And they weren't going to tell me. I could have screamed. I could have driven to Lana's house and pounded on her perfect red front door, demanded answers. But I didn't. I didn't because I had learned rage is noise. And my family never heard noise unless it came with balloons or matching napkins. Instead, I called the real estate agent. I gave her my name, Evelyn Hart, and waited for the pause. It came like I knew it would. "Oh, you're that Hart," she said, her voice thinning out. "Yes," I replied calmly. "The other one." She offered to send over the full packet. I accepted. No questions, no hesitation. Within hours, I had it all. The price, the LLC trail, the lapsed tax reports, the careless insurance gaps. My father had built a safeguard in the trust, one that bypassed emotion and favouritism and went straight to logic. If things were mismanaged, the quiet daughter inherited, not the popular one, not the charming one. Me. But here's the thing no one tells you about reclaiming something lost. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like breaking a glass that was already cracked, then realising your hands are full of splinters you didn't expect. Still, I didn't stop. I booked a flight. I signed the papers. I rerouted mail. I scheduled a maintenance check on the plumbing, the kind of thing Lana never bothered with. I placed a reservation for one guest only, Miss Evelyn Hart, for the upcoming family weekend. Under special requests, I typed cotton sheets, firm pillows, bottle of dry champagne on ice, full privacy preferred. Then I waited. The day they were due to arrive, I drove out early. I didn't enter through the front. I didn't need to. The house hadn't changed much. The shutters were more peeled than I remembered. The porch swing was still slightly crooked, but the air, it had that same salt-heavy breath it always did, like memory made tangible. I walked through the rooms with the reverence of someone entering a cathedral. Every floorboard creak had its own ghost. Every wall remembered. There were photos still on the hallway shelf, mostly Lana's family, but I found one in the back near the stairwell, faded and out of focus. It was me and Dad on the porch, him mid-laugh, me holding up a dripping popsicle like a trophy. I pocketed it, then I left. I parked 2 blocks away and waited in a rental car. My hands didn't shake. I thought they might, but they didn't. Instead, I watched as a white SUV pulled into the driveway right on cue. Lana's husband stepped out first, barking orders. The twins spilled out next, already bickering. Then Lana, sunglasses, pressed linen, chin high. A second car followed, my mother, in pearls, like always. Her expression unreadable, even from here. They gathered their bags, the usual performance of arrival. Laughter, shouts, Lana waving a clipboard. She loved pretending to be the matriarch. They approached the front desk. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't have to. I saw the moment it happened. The clerk's gentle confusion, Lana's frown, the hesitation, then the pivot, the whisper. The manager being called over. Finally, I stepped out of the car and walked in. The lobby quieted like someone had turned down the volume of the world. My heels clicked across the tile. Lana turned. Her eyes widened. I stopped at the desk, smiled politely. "I can clarify," I said. "The house is reserved under my name." The clerk nodded. "Miss Evelyn Hart checked in this morning. Full reservation, no other guests listed." I handed her my ID. Calm, professional. Lana blinked. "You bought the house?" "Yes." "But why would you—" "Because I was never invited, but I never left." No one spoke. "I'm happy to cover their return transport," I added. "They shouldn't be made uncomfortable, but they're not on my guest list." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of reckoning, of recognition, of years gone by, and for the first time in a decade, I felt seen. Lana always had a way of making cruelty look like charm. It was her gift. She knew how to wield a smile like a scalpel, precise, bloodless, and undetectable until the wound started to sting. Growing up, everyone called her the Golden One. She had the laugh that filled rooms, the kind of laugh that made people forgive her before they even knew what she'd done. I was the quiet one. The one who read books while she coordinated flash mobs for Spirit Week. She got prom queen. I got a full ride to Stanford. My parents clapped louder for her. It wasn't just that Lana was loved more, though she was. It was that she was preferred in every room by every relative, and she knew it. She never had to ask for attention. It came to her like a tide, as if she were the moon pulling everyone into orbit. I used to believe that if I just worked hard enough, got the right degrees, said the right things, gave the right gifts, I'd be included too. But you can't audition for a role that someone else has already rewritten out of the script. There were early signs, of course. At 13, I won first place in a statewide writing competition. When I brought the certificate home, Lana was throwing a birthday party. No one noticed the award taped to the fridge. It disappeared the next day. Mum said maybe it fell off. I found it weeks later, crumpled behind the trash can. In college, I tried to reconnect. I flew home during breaks, offered to help around the house. Lana would always find a way to keep me one step out of frame, literally. In every photo, I was cropped, blurred, or mysteriously not in that one. She once sent me a holiday card with a collage of family moments from that year. I was there for every single one. I didn't appear in a single photo. But the deepest cut came when our father got sick. After the stroke, he couldn't speak for weeks. The doctors said it might take months, or that his speech might never fully return. Lana visited once, briefly, said she couldn't bear to see him that way. Mum was a mess. She barely came, so I stayed. I fed him, I shaved him. I read aloud from his favourite Steinbeck stories even when I wasn't sure he understood. I watched the corners of his mouth twitch, waiting for language to return. One night, long after visiting hours ended, he managed to grip my hand, just once, tight, like he needed me to anchor him. And then he whispered, slowly, painfully, "You stayed." Those 2 words were worth more than anything my family had given me in years. In the weeks that followed, he improved. Slowly but surely, he could say short sentences, smile, nod. On a Tuesday evening, while the machines hummed their steady rhythm, he asked me to record something. "I want you to keep the house," he said, his voice thin but certain. "Not because you earned it, because you held it. When the rest ran, you held." He asked me to save the recording. "Just in case," he said. I never told anyone I had it. I backed it up 3 times, uploaded it to a private cloud, and tucked a flash drive into the lining of my suitcase. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt scared. Scared of what Lana would do if she found out he hadn't chosen her. After Dad passed, the reading of the will was sanitized. Lana handled everything. She smiled through it all, eyes soft, voice calm. I wasn't even consulted on funeral arrangements. The house, I was told, was already in transition. They said it gently, like they were doing me a favour. I didn't argue. That was the moment I learned. Being erased doesn't start with a scream. It starts with silence. And Lana had always been fluent in the language of quiet exclusion. After the funeral, Lana didn't cry. She performed. She stood beside the casket with a soft, rehearsed expression, nodded graciously at condolences, and even made a joke about Dad's old fishing hat during her eulogy. People laughed. They called her strong. They whispered how proud Thomas would be of his oldest daughter. I stood in the back. No one asked me to speak. No one even acknowledged that I had taken care of him for the final 4 months of his life, that I had cleaned the bedpans, fought with the insurance company, and learned every nuance of his new medication schedule. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. After the service, Lana pulled me aside, her hand light on my elbow like a practiced politician. "Hey," she said softly. "Thanks for everything you did for Dad. Really, it means a lot." There was something about the way she said it that made it feel like a dismissal, not a thank you, like my usefulness had run its course and she could now resume her spotlight, uninterrupted. A week later I asked Mum about the estate. Not about the money, I didn't care about that. I asked what would happen to the house, to the legacy, to Dad's wishes. Mum gave me a tight smile. "Lana and I are working through it. You don't need to worry, Evelyn. Just focus on your career, sweetheart. That's your world, isn't it?" I almost laughed. That's your world. Like I had picked ambition over them, when really they'd just built walls I wasn't allowed to scale. That winter, I returned to the beach house one last time. I had found a spare weekend between meetings in Atlanta and decided to drive down, just a few hours, just to sit on the porch. But when I arrived, the key wasn't under the mat. I checked again, lifted the faded welcome mat, fingers trembling. Nothing. I called Lana. "Oh," she said brightly, like we were talking about dinner reservations. "Yeah, we had to change the locks after a break-in. Sorry, forgot to update you." Break-in? No one had mentioned a break-in. There were no police reports, no security camera images, no notes from the neighbourhood watch, just a changed lock and a smiling excuse. That was the moment the final tether snapped. I stopped flying home for holidays. I stopped sending cards. I watched from afar as they posted family photos, hosted reunions, shared updates about the Hart legacy. Evelyn Hart didn't exist in those posts. Lana was now the anchor of the family, the one keeping it all together. And yet somehow I still knew everything, because Savannah, my college roommate, my quiet ally, never stopped looping me in. She worked at a paralegal firm in Georgia just outside of Savannah. Yes, we joked about that a lot. Over the years, she'd send me screenshots, notes, odd email forwards that landed in her inbox because someone didn't scrub the recipient list properly. Sometimes it was small, a party invite that skipped me, a family vote about the house taken without my knowledge. Other times it was uglier. "They think you disappeared," Savannah told me once, over a late-night call. "But you've just been listening." That sentence stayed with me. They said I was distant, that I'd chosen career over connection. But the truth was I had just stopped shouting into a room that had already decided not to hear me. They had painted a version of me that made their guilt easier to carry. Evelyn, the overachiever. Evelyn, the one who made everything about herself. Evelyn, the too sensitive daughter who probably didn't even like the beach anyway. I didn't correct them. Not then. Because I knew something they didn't. They had erased me. But I had never disappeared. I was just waiting for the right moment. And sometimes the ones you erase are the ones who remember the most. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown in all the ways that mattered. Time had a funny way of shrinking sacred places until they barely fit the shape of the memory. When I pulled up in the rented sedan just after dawn, the fog was still rolling off the ocean like breath. The house stood like a forgotten lighthouse, white paint chipped in places. The shutters on the east side tilted like a crooked smile. But the porch swing was still there, still creaking in rhythm with the tide, still holding the echo of the last time my father sat there, his hand on my shoulder, his voice soft with pride. This was our house. Not in a monetary sense, not in a deed or clause or shell company. It was ours because it had held our silences, our laughter, our arguments that ended with tears and then pie on the porch. It was ours because of who we were in it, and yet, somehow, they had decided it no longer needed me. The lock clicked open with the new key I had picked up from the attorney's office just an hour earlier. I stepped inside and immediately exhaled. The scent hadn't changed, ocean salt, aged wood, and the faintest trace of cinnamon from the kitchen drawer where Grandma used to hide gum. The air wrapped around me like an old friend. I moved slowly through the rooms. The living room was untouched. Lana's framed family portraits lined the mantel like trophies. Her boys smiling on the beach, her husband holding up a wine glass at sunset, Lana herself mid-laugh in a hammock. There was not a single photo of Dad. Not one of me. I walked into the office, my father's sanctuary. The desk was still there, scratched at the corners, the drawer slightly misaligned from years of overuse. I opened it carefully and found, at the very back, something that made my breath catch, a chipped ceramic mug with number 1 Dad scrawled in faded paint. I had made it when I was 7 at a summer art camp. He used it every morning until the handle cracked. I touched the edge and felt something pulse in my chest. Memory, real memory, not the curated kind Lana liked to post online. In the guest bedroom, I found old linens still folded with precision, Grandma's touch, no doubt. There were tiny lavender sachets in each drawer. One had my name stitched in cursive on the corner. Evie, only she ever called me that. A name wrapped in warmth. I moved through the house like a pilgrim. Each room a chapter I hadn't been allowed to reread in a decade. I didn't cry, not yet, but the weight of it settled on me like sand in pockets, quiet, dense, impossible to shake. In the kitchen, I opened the fridge. Empty. I wasn't surprised. I hadn't come to be fed. I came to reclaim. I pulled out the reservation form I had submitted. 1 guest, master suite, 3 nights. The champagne I'd requested hadn't arrived yet. I made a note to follow up with the property management company. I wanted everything perfect, not for them, for me. Because tomorrow they'd arrive, with their suitcases, their matching outfits, their cheerful entitlement, expecting what they'd always gotten, a weekend in their kingdom, uninterrupted. But this time they would have to knock. I sat on the edge of the porch swing, watching the sun begin its slow crawl over the water. I could hear the gulls overhead, the gentle rattle of palm fronds, and underneath it all the faint hum of something deeper. This house remembered me, even if they didn't, and when they arrived, it would remind them, without raising its voice, without needing proof, that I had always been here, waiting. I didn't stay long that first day, just long enough to ensure everything was in place. Sheets turned down, guest registry signed, water running clear from the taps. The house was ready, and so was I. Before leaving, I placed the old mug I'd found in the office, one Dad, on the windowsill facing the driveway. A tiny rebellion, a whisper in ceramic. Let them see it and wonder. Let them feel the disturbance in their carefully constructed narrative. Back in the rental car, I parked 2 streets over, out of view, but close enough to watch. My phone buzzed once. Savannah. They're landing at noon, should be there by 3. You good? More than good, I typed back. Time to return the favour. At 3:06 p.m, the white SUV pulled up, right on schedule. I watched Lana emerge first, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, coordinating luggage in tow. Her boys followed, dragging bright blue duffels with baseball team logos. Her husband, ever the stoic accessory, grunted instructions about who grabbed what. Then came Mom. She wore her usual beach uniform, pressed white slacks, a linen blouse and a string of pearls, always the pearls. Her face was unreadable, as if she'd rehearsed neutrality in the mirror all morning. They looked exactly how I remembered them, sun-kissed, smiling, ready to pretend everything was perfect. The moment their feet hit the porch, I knew the shift was coming, the tremor in the foundation of their assumptions. From my vantage point, I couldn't hear the front desk clerk's voice, but I could read the body language. The slight tilt of Lana's head, the stiffening of her shoulders, the confused shrug from the twins, the way Mom stood slightly back, already bracing for something unspoken. The clerk gestured toward the reservation log, shaking her head politely. Lana leaned in, her voice tightening. Then came the name. I saw it on her lips, even from a distance. Evelyn? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a recognition that didn't bring joy, only threat. That was my cue. I stepped from the car, heels clicking across the driveway like punctuation marks on a long-forgotten sentence. My heart didn't race. My breath stayed steady. I walked like someone who belonged, because I did. As I entered the lobby, time folded in. Lana turned. Our eyes locked. She blinked once, then again. "Evelyn?" I nodded at the clerk. "I can clarify," I said. "This reservation is under my name, Miss Evelyn Hart." The clerk brightened. "Yes, everything's in order. Champagne's in the suite. Would you like help with your luggage?" Lana's voice was low, sharp. You bought the house?" "Yes." "But why?" "Because I was never invited," I said, turning to face her fully. "But I was never gone." Mum stepped forward, her voice thin, almost trembling. "Evelyn, this is extreme." "Not really. You changed the locks. I changed the deed." Silence fell like dust. I could feel it, not just discomfort, but disorientation. They weren't used to seeing me like this. Not angry, not broken, just resolved. "I'm happy to help arrange accommodations elsewhere," I offered, as if I were speaking to guests at a business event. "But your names aren't on the reservation, and I've requested full privacy." Lana's jaw flexed. "You think this proves something?" "No, it settles something." The clerk hesitated, looking between us. "They're not on the guest list," I said gently. "But be kind. They're family." That broke something, not in me, in them. They didn't argue, they didn't plead, they just gathered their bags and walked out, not with anger, with silence, the kind of silence that says, "You were right, we just hoped you'd never realise it." I watched them go. I didn't smile, I didn't cry. I simply turned back toward the house that had once been theirs and was now, undeniably, mine. The fallout didn't come in shouts or slammed doors. It came in whispers, inbox pings, and headlines. By morning, I was no longer just Evelyn Hart, the daughter who vanished from family photos. I was a mystery heiress, a legal hijacker, a cold strategist who seized her family estate through a trust clause. The news van pulled up just after sunrise, white with bold navy lettering. I watched from the upstairs window as a man in a blazer adjusted his mic. His expression was grave, like he was reporting from a war zone. I didn't answer the door. I didn't need to. The segment aired by noon, a slick edit of Beach House B-roll, an old photo of Lana smiling on the porch, and the headline, "Daughter uses legal loophole to oust family from legacy property." They made me sound like a villain from a courtroom drama. Then came the texts. "Is this true? You bought the house behind your family's back." "This doesn't seem like you, Evelyn." What struck me wasn't the volume of messages. It was who sent them. Old colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years, former neighbours, college acquaintances who still followed Lana on social media. And then the worst one, a voicemail from my godmother, Susan. "I don't know what happened, sweetheart, but this isn't the Evelyn I know. Call me." I didn't return the calls, not yet. Instead, I dialed Savannah. "Time to release the rest," I said. "No commentary?" she asked. "None, just the truth." Within the hour, she uploaded the full archive to a private drive, the audio recordings, the text messages, and most damning of all, the video, the one we had recorded 2 years ago. In it, my father sat bundled in a blanket on the back porch, his face thinner but calm. His voice, though slower, was unmistakably lucid. "I want Evelyn to have this house," he said. "She was the only one who stayed. She didn't ask for anything. She just came." Then after a pause, he looked toward the camera and added, "It's not about fairness. It's about memory." That line gutted me when I first heard it. It gutted me again now. Savannah sent the link to one journalist, a woman she trusted, who had once covered elder care and inheritance manipulation in a piece that went viral for all the right reasons. No spin, no clickbait, just context. The article published quietly the next day. A simple headline, "The Other Side of the Story." It included screenshots of messages where Lana said things like, "Don't worry, Evelyn won't show. She's too busy making herself look important. Let her rot in her condo. She's always been too fragile for this family." The article embedded the video. It linked to court documents showing how the trust had been mismanaged, how the fallback clause had been triggered legally and cleanly. There were no embellishments. No dramatic music. Just a calm voiceover explaining a daughter's quiet return to a legacy she had never stopped loving. That evening, Savannah texted me 3 words: "They've gone quiet." And it was true. My inbox, once vibrating with judgments, was now still. The calls stopped. The headlines faded beneath newer scandals. Lana hadn't posted in 24 hours. A record. But the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like the eye of a storm. Because I knew my sister, and she never stayed quiet for long. It didn't take long for Lana to re-emerge. 2 days after the article went live, I received a notification. Evelyn Hart filed a petition for injunction on disputed property, citing undue influence and elder manipulation. She wasn't just coming for the house. She was coming for the story. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Savannah and I sat on the back porch the night the papers were delivered. She had brought wine and a box of pastries from a cafe downtown. We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the wind shift through the trees and the ocean in the distance, relentless in its rhythm. "She's betting on performance," Savannah said finally. "That's what this is. Drama in a courtroom. She thinks she can sway it with tone." "She might," I admitted. "People like Lana are trained in public sympathy." Savannah looked at me. "But facts don't bend to charm." I nodded, but I wasn't afraid of facts. I was afraid of what they meant when wielded by someone who knew how to twist them. The courthouse smelled of bleach and paper. I wore navy, what my grandmother used to call steel-willed blue, and carried a single folder beneath my arm. No entourage, no lawyer in an expensive suit. Just Savannah beside me, calm and quiet. Lana was already seated when we entered. Her white pantsuit was pristine, her hair twisted into a perfect chignon. Mum sat beside her, pearls glinting under the fluorescent lights, her eyes flickering away when they met mine. They didn't look angry, they looked composed, which somehow was worse. The clerk called the case, Hart versus Hart, petition for injunction on family property under claim of elder manipulation. Lana's attorney stood first, young, tanned, performative. He used words like vulnerable, confused, and family betrayal. He described my actions as strategic, predatory, emotionally indifferent. He said I had taken advantage of a man in decline, using loopholes to steal something sacred. He paused before that last word, letting it linger. Sacred. Like he knew the courtroom would inhale at the weight of it. I didn't flinch, not once. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, the folder still in hand. "Your Honour," I said clearly, "I'd like to submit video and audio evidence relevant to the trust and my father's stated intentions." The judge nodded. The lights dimmed slightly as the bailiff set up the screen. I watched Lana shift in her seat, just barely, but enough. The video began, Dad on the porch, blanket wrapped around his legs, the chipped mug in hand. "I want Evelyn to have this house." His voice wasn't weak, it was deliberate. "Lana makes things loud," he said. "Evelyn makes things last. She's the only one who came after the fall." A pause. Then, "It's not about fairness. It's about memory." The room was still. Next came the audio, Lana on speakerphone, her voice clipped and sharp. She was never part of this family. She should have been easier to control. That last line landed like a punch. The judge leaned back in his chair, removed his glasses. He tapped a pen once, then twice. "This court," he said, "does not resolve emotional wounds. It enforces law." He turned to Lana's attorney. "The evidence presented confirms clear mental capacity and intention. The petition is denied." He banged the gavel. Lana didn't move, her jaw clenched. Her fingers curled around the edge of her blazer. Mom looked straight ahead, unblinking. I gathered my folder. I didn't gloat. I didn't look back. Outside, reporters waited. One of them leaned forward, mic raised. "Miss Hart, do you have anything you'd like to say to your family?" I paused, then, "No, I already said it." I smiled faintly. I just used quieter words, and I walked away. I returned to the house that evening in silence. The courtroom victory felt like a distant echo. Real, yes, but not quite grounding. There were no cheers, no applause, no finish line to cross. Only the steady breath of the ocean waiting at the edge of the porch. Inside, everything looked the same, and somehow completely different. I moved through each room slowly, not to inspect but to remember. The silence wasn't cold anymore, it was spacious, as if the walls had exhaled, finally allowed to stretch into something new. In the office, I opened the bottom drawer of Dad's desk. Not the top one, not the locked middle, but the one no one ever paid attention to. Inside, I found a plastic bag wrapped tight around something fragile, our wind chime. We'd made it the summer I turned 9. Blue thread, mismatched seashells, a few tiny bells that had long since rusted. My initials, E.H., were still faintly etched into one of the shells. Dad's handwriting labelled the bag, "Fix it when you're ready." I sat on the floor, cross-legged like a child, and untangled the knots. One shell at a time. I didn't try to make it perfect. I wasn't fixing it for display. I was fixing it because some things don't have to be flawless to be worth keeping. By the time Savannah arrived with dinner, I had strung the last shell in place. "You didn't think I'd let you clean out ghosts alone, did you?" She smiled, setting down a container of lemon pepper chicken and wiping her hands on her jeans. "Also, I brought window cleaner." I laughed. A short one, but real. We spent the next 2 hours scrubbing out more than dust, every window, every cabinet. It was quiet work, no music, no talking, just the creak of old wood and the occasional sigh of air between rooms. At sunset, I climbed up on the porch railing and hung the wind chime outside the kitchen window. The breeze picked up at just the right moment, and the shells danced like they remembered how. Savannah leaned against the doorway. "Looks good there." "It belongs there." Later, we sat on the porch with 2 glasses of wine. No toasts, no grand reflections. Just the sea in front of us, the wind behind us, and a house that no longer needed defending. "What now?" Savannah asked. I sipped slowly. Let the salt air coat my tongue. "They said I left," I said finally, "that I chose to drift, but I never went anywhere." She didn't interrupt. She knew better than anyone that truth rarely needed backup. It just needed space to speak. "They just chose not to see me," I added. And for once I didn't say it with bitterness. I said it like someone placing the final piece of a puzzle, not triumphant, just whole. Savannah tilted her head, watching the sky shift from lavender to slate. "So what now?" she asked again. This time, I answered with certainty. "Now, I make this mine, not out of revenge, not even out of grief, but because I deserve to take up space." She raised her glass. "To taking up space." And for the first time in years, I raised mine back. The next morning, I rose before the sun and opened every curtain in the house. I wanted the light to reach every corner, every shadow that had once held the silence of exclusion. The floors creaked under my feet like a welcome. I brewed coffee and drank it on the back steps, the chipped #1 dad mug warm in my hands. Something about this moment felt ceremonial. I wasn't just occupying space anymore, I was claiming it. After breakfast, I dug through the attic, an uninsulated space crammed with forgotten history. Old beach chairs, boxes marked Lana, College, a broken fan. And in the far corner beneath a plastic tarp, I found what I was hoping for, a cardboard box labelled in faint black Sharpie, Evie's Art, 1997. I pulled it into the light. Inside were finger paintings, clay figurines, a sand dollar painted with smiley faces. Every piece was tiny, imperfect, and mine. I sat cross-legged on the floor and sorted through them with quiet reverence. These were the things they'd left behind, not because they didn't matter, but because I didn't. I selected one, a wobbly watercolour of the beach house, drawn in childish lines, the porch swing hanging crooked and the sky filled with yellow scribbles. I brought it downstairs and framed it using one of Lana's old photo frames. Then I hung it in the hallway right outside the office, not as a statement, as a restoration. By afternoon, Savannah returned with her laptop and 2 iced coffees. "Court orders sealed," she said, settling into a chair at the dining table. "Media's moved on. Lana's lawyer tried floating an appeal, but it fizzled. It's done." I didn't react. Not out of indifference, but because I'd already felt it the moment the wind chime rang the night before. This house no longer braced for battle. It breathed. "Did you see Lana's new post?" she added. "No." Savannah turned the screen toward me. Lana's face filled the frame, eyes red, voice trembling. A caption beneath read, "Healing is never linear. Sometimes families fracture. Sometimes they need space to find their way back. We move forward with grace." I watched it twice. Not for the content, but for the performance. "She's building her next narrative," Savannah said. "Let her," I replied. I wasn't interested in rebuttals, not anymore. I had stopped writing footnotes in other people's stories. That night I hosted myself a dinner, 1 plate, cloth napkin, candle flickering softly beside the wine glass. I played Dad's favourite jazz record on the old speaker and let the notes carry through the house like a conversation. After dessert, lemon tart from the cafe down the road, I returned to the porch. The stars overhead were sharp and clear, the wind warm against my face. I looked toward the kitchen window where the wind chimes swayed gently, its soft music threading through the air. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next dismissal. I wasn't listening for a door to slam behind me. I was home. Not the version they'd curated, the one I remembered, the one that remembered me back. The silence after conflict isn't always peace. Sometimes it's waiting, sometimes it's the inhale before the next blow, but this time it felt different, it felt like choice. The day after the court's decision, I received an email from a journalist named Mel Rhodes. She was the one Savannah had trusted with the archive. Her message was brief but kind. "Thank you for sharing what you did. You didn't just shift a story, you gave voice to the ones who've been erased. If you're open to it, I'd love to talk more. Not as a headline, as a person." I didn't reply right away. I let it sit. Instead, I spent the morning sorting through the bookshelves in Dad's office. Dust-covered paperbacks, hardcovers with brittle spines, journals with pages stuck together by humidity. In the back row, I found a small leather-bound notebook. No name on the cover. I opened it and immediately recognized the handwriting. It was his. The first page read, "Evie's questions, because she never stopped asking." I sat down hard in the old desk chair. Page after page, Dad had recorded snippets of our conversations. Not just facts or figures, but memories, thoughts I'd shared, theories I'd rambled about at 12, questions I asked at 15, ideas I wanted to chase at 20. He'd written them all down, and in the margins, notes to himself. Follow up on her art project, buy supplies. Evie's voice, soft but exact. Don't let it get lost. She will build things that last. Tears came then, sharp and sudden. Not the kind that demanded sobs, the kind that made breathing a process. This wasn't validation, it was evidence. I hadn't imagined the connection. I hadn't inflated my role in his life. I had mattered quietly, continuously, even when no one else saw it. When I finally replied to Mel's email, I kept it simple. Thank you. Not now, but maybe someday. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the property, not out of paranoia but intention. I paused at every tree, every corner of the fence line, every inch of the porch I used to race across barefooted. I wanted to know every step of this land, not for court filings or deeds, for belonging. As I stood near the eastern edge of the property, just beyond the dune line, I saw footprints in the sand. Not mine. Too small for Savannah. Too erratic for someone on a walk. I followed them a few yards until I saw a flash of fabric in the sea oats, someone sitting. A figure, hunched low, shoulders trembling. It was my mother. I didn't call out. I approached slowly, the way you would with an injured bird. She didn't turn, but she knew I was there. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice fraying at the edges. I remember when you were born, she said. The nurse handed you to me and said, she's quiet. I didn't think that would mean invisible. I sat beside her, not touching. You made it easy, she continued. Lana always needed something, attention, approval, a new plan. You didn't, you just adapted. I said nothing, because I wasn't there to console her. I was there to hear her. Was I cruel? She asked after a long pause. I thought about that. No, I said. You were convenient. She winced. Then, you were always watching. We didn't know how to handle that. I stood slowly. I don't need an apology, I said. I needed space, and I have it now. I walked away, not in anger, but with clarity. The next morning, she was gone. No note, no confrontation, just a faint imprint in the sand where she had sat, like a moment that passed without insisting on being remembered, and somehow that felt right. I didn't tell Savannah. Some things weren't meant to be retold. They just lived where they landed, in memory, not narrative. That day, I began a new ritual. Each morning I would walk the house before the world woke. I'd trace the edges of each room, touch the banisters, straighten a frame, open a window, let air move through the places where secrets had once festered. In the afternoons, I painted, not professionally, not even well, but freely. The office became a makeshift studio, a tarp on the floor, a jar of brushes. Canvases lined along the walls like questions waiting for answers. I painted what I remembered, the porch swing before it rusted, Dad's shadow leaning over a grill, my tiny hands shaping sandcastles beside the dunes. And the house responded. It stopped creaking at odd hours, the floorboards felt more stable, even the old shutters outside stopped clattering every time the wind sighed. It's strange, the things a home can hold, the weight of silence, the echo of someone's absence, but also the warmth of return. One afternoon, Savannah arrived with a small package. No name, she said, handing it to me. Just said to deliver it here. I opened it carefully. Inside was a faded photograph. Me at 8, standing on the porch with a popsicle in one hand and a determined look on my face. Lana beside me, already posing, already perfect. And behind us, Dad, mid-laugh, holding a garden hose. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, 4 words. You were always there. I didn't know what to make of it. A peace offering? A confession? But I placed it on the fridge anyway. That night, I lit a candle in the kitchen and sat with the lights off, letting the flicker bounce against the walls, soft and uncertain. I thought about all the ways I had fought to be seen, how quiet I'd become just to survive their noise, and how I wasn't quiet anymore. The next morning I received a letter from the county recorder's office. The deed transfer was officially complete, all titles reassigned, all clauses fulfilled. I stood in the foyer, the paper in hand, and whispered aloud, "It's mine. Not stolen, not inherited out of pity, not a favour granted through a loophole. Mine." Later, I hung the deed beside the framed watercolour from when I was a child, a full circle, side by side, the version of me that dreamed and the version that endured. Savannah and I celebrated that evening with pizza on the porch. Nothing fancy, just greasy slices and root beer in mismatched mugs. We didn't toast, we just clinked crusts. "I think you rebuilt something," she said. "Not rebuilt," I corrected. "Reclaimed." We watched the horizon for a long time. No words, just the soft lull of the sea and the wind chime tapping gently in the breeze. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this. I had made space where there had once been absence, and I had filled it, not with vengeance or noise, but with proof. Proof that I was always here, even when they stopped looking, especially then. Weeks passed, not in a rush of victory, but in the slow settling of truth. The beach house didn't transform overnight. There were still shutters that needed paint, a loose stair on the porch, salt stains that refused to scrub out of the window frames. But it felt more solid now, not because it was mine, but because I was in it, fully, finally. I began to receive letters, not dozens, not floods. Just a few, handwritten, always from people I didn't know. "I saw your story. I haven't spoken to my sister in 8 years. They told me I was too quiet to be missed. Thank you for proving we aren't the ones who disappeared." Each letter carried a weight, not of sadness, but of recognition. Strangers who had felt the same quiet erasure. People who had been cropped out of photos, muted in group chats, remembered only when convenient. It wasn't about the house. It was never about the house. It was about being believed, about having the silence finally say something. I kept each letter in a wooden box beneath the bookshelf. I didn't reply, I didn't post about them, but I read every word, and in doing so, I built something bigger than reclaiming my family's property. I built community out of quiet. One day, Savannah asked if she could bring someone by. "Someone who understands," she said cryptically. I agreed, half expecting another lawyer, maybe a local journalist. Instead, she arrived with a woman in her early 50s, grey-streaked hair, linen shirt, eyes sharp with a lifetime of swallowed words. Her name was Michelle. She sat with me on the porch for an hour without speaking. Just watched the water, the wind chime, the swing creaking in the breeze. And then finally, she said, "They did it to me too." That was all. She didn't need to elaborate. I already knew the stories were different, but the bones were always the same. Dismissed, diminished, erased, and still here. The porch became a kind of sanctuary after that. Every Sunday, women showed up, one at a time. Never more than 2 or 3. They brought wine, pie, stories. They left with silence softened around their edges. It wasn't therapy, it was remembering, reclaiming. One afternoon as I swept the porch steps, Lana appeared. She didn't knock. Just stood at the edge of the driveway, her white car gleaming behind her like a reminder of who she used to be. Her sunglasses were off. That's how I knew she came for real. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I didn't invite her up, but I didn't send her away. She stood there for a long time, hands clenched, eyes flickering over every detail, the porch swing, the chime, the worn welcome mat I'd bought from a local shop. Finally, she said, "I thought they'd always pick me." I didn't answer, because we both knew they did. Then she added, "You always looked like the kind of person who could take being forgotten." That one stung, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I said, "I learned to take it. That doesn't mean I should have had to." She nodded once. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "It's beautiful," she whispered, glancing at the house. "It always was," I said. "You just stopped seeing it." She left without another word, and that was enough. I didn't need her confession. I just needed to stop needing it. That evening, after Lana drove away, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse into catharsis. I swept the porch one more time, then sat down with my tea, letting the weight of that moment settle where it belonged, not in my chest, but in the past. I hadn't won her back. I hadn't needed to. Some relationships don't mend. They don't bloom in the aftershock of apology. They simply stop bleeding. And sometimes that's healing enough. I scrolled through my phone and reread one of the letters from the box. They always said I was difficult. I think they just didn't like how clearly I remembered. That line stuck with me. So much of being erased isn't about being unworthy, it's about being inconvenient. I had remembered too well. Spoken up when it would have been easier to nod, asked questions when silence was expected, but I had never vanished. And now I was louder than ever without even raising my voice. Weeks turned to months. The house transformed slowly through small acts, fresh paint on the shutters, a repaired porch step, flowers planted along the walkway. I didn't overhaul it, I restored it, honouring what was while refusing to recreate what hurt. One afternoon, a man knocked on the door. He was in his 60s, beard greying, baseball cap faded from sun. When I answered, he smiled sheepishly and said, "I used to mow your dad's lawn." I invited him in, made coffee. He told me stories I hadn't heard, about how Dad would offer extra cash for weed pulling, about how he once built a ramp during Grandma's last summer here without telling anyone, just because she didn't like asking for help. Before he left, he said, "He always talked about you, you know, always said you were the one who'd hold it all together." I didn't have words, so I just nodded. Later that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. I began typing, not for publication or validation, but for me. For every Evie who had been forgotten, edited out, or dismissed. I started with a sentence I never thought I'd write. I wasn't left behind, I was just never called back. I wrote until the screen blurred. It wasn't a story of revenge, it wasn't a takedown, it was a map of silence, and how to survive it. The next morning, I printed it out and placed it in the bookshelf between Dad's journals and my childhood sketchbook. A new artifact in a house full of reclaimed memories. When Savannah visited that weekend, she brought croissants and a letter. Last one, she said, came with no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a simple card. No paragraphs, no signature. Just 4 words in familiar handwriting. You came back stronger. I knew who sent it, and I smiled, because after everything, after the courtroom, the confrontation, the decades of dismissal, those 4 words were enough. I walked to the kitchen, opened the window, and let the breeze in. The wind chimes stirred again, catching the light, its sound faint but certain, like it had always been there, like I had, and always would.